Narendra Modi is in France for a two-day visit, from the AI summit to CEO's forum to a bilateral with the French president. It is a power-packed itinerary for the Prime Minister. Now, Prime Minister Modi was invited by the French president to co-chair the AI summit in Paris. French president welcomed Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi with a warm hug upon his arrival in Paris for a dinner at the palace. The two leaders shared a candid moment before engaging in discussions reflecting the strong ties between India and France. Expressing his joy for the visit, Prime Minister posted on social media. He said, and I quote, "Delighted to meet my friend President Macron in Paris." In fact, this is Prime Minister's visit to France. Let me go across to Madhav Das Gopalakrishnan, who's reporting from there. In fact, Prime Minister is in France. He's on a two-day visit there. What is on the agenda?
Well, there are multiple meetings of the Prime Minister with, in fact, French President Emmanuel Macron. And in fact, what we're seeing, in fact, is not just one, but two dinners that the French President is hosting for Prime Minister Modi. There's also very interestingly going to be a visit to the common, science project related to nuclear science, in fact, which a nuclear reactor, in fact, which is being visited by Prime Minister Modi as well. But there is about another 36 hours to go for that visit to conclude. And what is very interesting is that following that AI summit and, of course, all those interactions between the Prime Minister and the French President, is that he will be heading to Washington, D.C., where I'm currently at. And Prime Minister Modi will be perhaps the second biggest global leader to be meeting President Trump in his second tenure. He has right now met with Netanyahu, of course, of Israel, and he is expected to meet with the Japanese PM as well. But Prime Minister Modi, really underlining the kind of relation that not just the two of them have, but the two countries have in terms of, the ties between these two countries. Various areas of cooperation, whether it's security, whether it's technology, whether it is, their own strategic alliance itself. But the point is that there are various issues for the two leaders to also, work out, whether it is tariffs, whether it's issues relating to immigration. And we've seen the kind of controversies domestically when it comes to those who've been deported from the United States. How does this, go on from here? And of course, President Trump has his own issues politically to address as well right after this election. All of this will be interesting to watch out for over the next 48 to 72 hours when PM Modi arrives here in Washington, D.C., the U.S. capital, to meet with President Trump. Back to you, Akansha.
Well, absolutely. After France, Prime Minister will be heading towards the United States. But if we talk about the relationship of India with France, it has been deep and, in fact, old. So take us through how important is this summit for India and France?
Well, there are two or three very important aspects that we have to consider. France is a very important partner for India as far as its own defense procurement is concerned. Remember that it is not just the Rafales that we are currently using, the Mirage 2000s that we've had in the past and other, the defense aviation areas have been very, very important as far as India and France's own cooperation is concerned. Even the Scorpion submarine, various helicopter projects in terms of engine development, there have been different areas where France has steadfastly been one of India's closest partners, and internationally speaking as well, in very, very difficult situations, including after India's Pokhran nuclear test. France is one of the few countries that actually stood by India and continues to be one of the most important proponents of even the UN Security Council permanent members' reformation. Given all of that and given the background that the two countries have enjoyed, very, very important to see what is currently taking place. And remember, in the budget, we had seen how Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman had announced special initiatives as far as small nuclear projects is concerned. That's something that is very, very important for not just France, but also the United States, given that the 2008 Indo-US nuclear deal, which has paved the way, of course, for the possibility of such reactors, but the point of, how it will actually be implemented on ground is going to be interesting from not just this France visit point of view, but also from the US visit point of view in terms of what will actually happen on ground. So these are some of the important aspects that we are looking at. We will have to wait, of course, for the final outcomes of both of these bilateral meetings to take place and for the final announcements to actually happen.
Well, absolutely. As soon as the Prime Minister, in fact, arrived in France, he received a rousing welcome by the Indian diaspora there. Have a look at what they said.
देखो हम कैसे मिलजुल कर रहते हैं, मोदी जी आए हैं, मोदी जी आए हैं।
हम बहुत खुश हैं, मोदी जी हमारे देश में आए इधर। हाँ जी, हमने हाथ मिलाया, हम बहुत खुश हैं, बहुत खुश।
मैंने उनसे बात की है कि देश के ये पहले प्राइम मिनिस्टर हैं जो सब धर्मों की बात करते हैं, सिख गुरुओं के जन्मदिन मनाते हैं, साहिबजादों के जन्मदिन मनाते हैं और सबको साथ लेके चलते हैं, सबका साथ सबका विकास। ये पहले प्रधानमंत्री है जो सबके धर्मों के लिए बात करते हैं।
और मैं चौथी दफा मिला हूँ मोदी जी से, मैं चौथी दफा मिला हूँ। मेरे को पहचानते हैं, बोले कैम छे, मेरे को कैम छे, मैंने पूछू छू गुजराती में कैम छे, हूँ एमने 4 वखत ओळखू छू। भारत माता की जय, भारत माता की वंदे वंदे वंदे।
बहुत अच्छा लगा, हमने उनसे हाथ मिलाया, हमें इतना अपनापन लगा उनके साथ कि उन्होंने खुद से हमसे हाथ मिलाया, केमचो बोला, तो बहुत अच्छा एक्सपीरियंस था। और हम उनके लिए रुके हैं, हमको सपोर्ट करने के लिए एआई समिट के लिए आए हैं। तो बारिश भी इतने बारिश और ठंड है, हाथ ठंडे पड़ गए हैं।
ऐसा लगा मूवमेंट फ्रीज हो गया, उनसे हाथ मिला के। बारिश भी हो रहा था, नमस्कार कहा, शुक्रिया कहा, सब कुछ इतना अच्छा मूवमेंट रहा।
भगवान उनकी रक्षा करे। Well, from France, Prime Minister Narendra Modi will travel to the United States on the second leg of his two-nation tour. Let's tell you a little bit about the agenda of the two-day visit to France. Now, here, the Prime Minister will be co-chairing AI Action Summit with France, is what we are learning. This will help in strengthening India-France strategic partnership as far as the agenda is concerned. Inauguration of the first Indian consulate in France will take place in the presence of the Prime Minister. He will also be visiting the thermonuclear experimental reactor project there along with the French President as far as the agenda is concerned. He will also be visiting the War Memorial to pay tributes when he is there with the French President is what we are learning. So this is as far as the agenda of the meeting is concerned. Let me go across to Madhav Das Gopala Krishnan. Madhav, as soon as the Prime Minister arrived in France, there was a rousing welcome by the Indian diaspora. We heard chants of Modi, Modi there. Take us through what was the sense on the ground there.
Well, as I was telling you earlier, it's not just the dinner that President Macron is hosting for Prime Minister Modi in Paris, but there's also that dinner in Marseille, and that's something that is rather unusual that we have seen hosting, a visiting head of state from outside of Paris, and in that sense, very, very interesting to see the kind of fact that France really going all the way as far as not just hosting the Prime Minister is concerned, but remember, 2 or 3 important aspects. The co-chair of this AI summit is Prime Minister Modi, which is a very, very important thing considering that there are various leaders from different countries, including Vice President of the United States, who's present over there, J.D. Vance, in fact, present over there as well as far as this particular summit is concerned. Several other leaders who will be present as far as AI summit is concerned, and that's very important from the perspective of all of these countries really coming together on the issue of AI, something that all nations are at the moment concerned about in terms of whether it should be something that should be regulated and whether it is something that we can continue to have, because it has on the one side many positives but also several negatives that have been seen. We've seen how China has brought out DeepSeek to in fact counter various platforms such as OpenAI, and what really is a roadmap forward for this. All of these are important questions that would be answered by that AI summit, hopefully, and various world leaders coming together to give their own inputs on how this cooperation internationally can go ahead, given that France has already given its own commitment to setting up of research in this particular area. Also, of course, very important, as I was mentioning earlier, is that this experimental nuclear reactor that we were talking about, that's something that's also going to be looked at very closely, given India's own experience and own announcements in recent years, and particularly, of course, as far as the budget is concerned, in terms of how smaller nuclear reactors can perhaps be used, can perhaps be implemented and clearing the decks for the actual implementation on the ground of such projects. So one will have to ultimately look at what the takeaways from both of these visits are concerned, given the fact that there is, of course, this big international AI summit that's happening in France. There are various bilateral meetings that are taking place over there, and also the fact that there will be a meeting here in the US between President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Modi. Important areas of cooperation and important areas where there are issues to be thrashed out, but one will have to look at what the final outcome is from all of these meetings and their importance for India itself.
Absolutely. So a very significant meeting of visit of the Prime Minister to France, which will help strengthen the ties between India and France. Thank you for all the details. We'll keep coming back to you for more on this with this, a short break.